Hello, everyone. Welcome to A Noise Within's Fridays at 5. My name is Jonathan Munoz-Prue. I am A Noise Within's Director of Cultural Programming. My pronouns are he, him, his, and I want to start by acknowledging that A Noise Within is on the traditional territory of the Gabrielino Tongva Nation. And I, while in quarantine, am here in San Diego, Kumeyaay land. So to give a little bit of context to what Fridays at 5 is it's a virtual space for us to gather about once every 2 weeks, about every other Friday. We come together with you, our audience, and we connect with our fellow artists, our collaborators, and we keep the conversation going about the work A Noise Within has been doing, hopes to do, plans to do, and they've been a really exciting space for us. So welcome today to the 3/5 project by photographer Ibarionex Perello. And I'd love to invite Ibarionex to come on stage and join us.
Hey, Jonathan, good to see you.
Hi, thank you. Great to see you, Ibarionex. Welcome, welcome. So for all of our folks watching from home, I just wanted to give a quick little outline of what to expect for this conversation. We're going to talk for about 30 to 45 minutes today, and we'll be sure to leave the last 5 or so minutes for any questions that you submit through your comments. So with that being said, welcome, Ibarionex. So why don't we start by you sharing just a little bit about your work as an artist, your artistic mission, and then after you've shared that, I can talk more about why we reached out to you and what our relationship is with The Noise Within. But why don't we start by hearing a bit more about you and what you do?
Well, thank you first for giving me the opportunity to join you. I really enjoyed working with everyone at A Noise Within last year, and I just like being able to reconnect during these times. In terms of my photography in my life, it's both been a means of making a living, primarily as a writer and an educator, as well as a photographer. But for me personally, I think that photography has always been the means by which I've had a voice to be able to point to things that I consider important. And most of it was born out of growing up in the 70s, where I felt like many of the things that I grew up around, the people that I grew up around in South LA, were things that I wasn't typically seeing on television, in magazines, and in newspapers, and much of it was primarily negative. And there were things that I saw that I found interesting and beautiful. And with the camera in hand, I was able to discover that the way that I personally saw the world was worth something. I had a very bad stutter when I was a kid, so I was not really adept in terms of using words and verbiage. I felt very self-conscious. But when I had a camera, I could point it at something innocuous, mundane, things that people would easily dismiss. And I could create photographs that would make them rediscover those very things. And I think that part of it is that I felt dismissed in a variety of different ways, but with a camera, I felt like that I was validated, and the way that I saw the world was validated. So a lot of my work, though it focuses on street photography, which has a lot of subgenres below it, at its heart, it's about it's the way that I see and being able to create things that mean something to me, either on a personal level or just on a social level. And it's the means by which I get to express myself best.
I love that, and we're seeing some of those images right now. I have to admit, I'm a passionate theater artist, and I appreciate visual art, and I adore photography, but I am certainly not an expert in photography or visual art. But I have always connected so deeply to your images because it's street photography. I can't totally describe it, but there is a beautiful, elegant simplicity to it that focuses, as a theater person, I'm going to say focuses a lot on character, a lot on relationships, And I was really just, I mean, I get chills looking at this because they communicate such story. I love the invitation to project my own narrative and a whole chapter book of stories onto every single one of these. And they almost seem like films or plays in pause.
Yeah.
So I want to share a little bit of context for our viewers. We're a theater company, and it's not every day we get to feature visual art. And if you've been to the theater in the past year and a half, I hope you've noticed in our lower lobby visual art exhibitions. We've actually hosted 4 visual art exhibitions that started in February 2019 with our newest initiative, Noise Now, which I've been leading for the past year and a half. We've worked not only with Ibarionex, but with Daniel Gonzalez, with Carolina Caicedo, with Mercedes Dorame, and with La Plaza de Cultura y Artes. And this particular partnership with Ibarionex began when we reached out to our colleagues at Pasadena Photography Arts. And it was an invitation to activate our lower lobby and specifically engage local artists to really lift up whatever voice they wanted to share within our spaces. So, Ibarionex, I'd love if you could share a little bit more about the beginning of our collaboration and how that started.
Well, as you mentioned, the Pasadena Photo Arts, Bill Wishner, who is the head of that, reached out to me and said that he was interested in collaborating with me and with you to create a art installation for the gallery. And initially, I had thought that I might, show work that I had previously created. But once we had a tour of the space and where the images were going to be exhibited, I realized that work probably just wouldn't work with the unusual location of where the images were, and just the fact that as people were passing through, that my existing images, even if printed large, weren't really going to be able to engage with people in the way they would at a normal art installation. And at the time, you guys were putting on Gem of the Ocean by August Wilson, who I am a great fan of. And I started thinking about not only that play, but all the other plays that I've seen before, like The Piano Lesson and all those. And a lot of those plays, and the underlying theme of them was the whole legacy of oppression, racism. But for me, it was that sort of perpetual angst that goes along with being a person of color who is subjected to discrimination and racism in all its different forms. And one of the things that they talk about in the play that you guys put on was about the bones. About the bones representing the ancestors. And I really gave thought that this, even though circumstances have changed and, in terms of the lives that African Americans can lead in this country, one of the things that hasn't changed is this constant feeling of anxiety, that you always are aware of your own skin tone. You're walking out of the door, regardless of what pedigree you may have, thinking about, am I going to have to deal with any sort of microaggression or overt racism today? And that creates a certain tension. And I felt like I've not seen that illustrated before because it's such an internal experience. And so as I thought about it, I came up with this concept, which resulted in the prints that are up on the wall, that I felt sort of express that anxiety, that fear, that anger, but also spoke to the idea of not just those negative feelings, but also to the joy, the freedom, the expressiveness that can happen even in the midst of that, you'll see that in the images, what I chose to do is I chose to sandwich a color image in the middle and then have two black and whites on the top and the bottom. And the black and white images, they were meant to basically represent those moments of extreme tension to the point that it seemed like the body was in rigor mortis. And then the center images, which are in color, that was supposed to serve as a contrast to it. And the choice of the red fabric was because I didn't want to use something that was analogous to bones. I thought that bloodlines was just as apt of a metaphor to use. And so I used a red fabric to elucidate bloodlines and the ancestors, as well as just to demonstrate that that not only the individual who is posing for my camera, but all of us are inexorably tied to the people that have gone before us.
Thank you so much, Ibarionex. I have chills looking at these images. I'm nervous putting any words to my experience, but I feel very grounded. There's an interesting juxtaposition of feeling at peace, but there's also a violence and a viciousness to the black and white images. And, prior to this exhibition, which is actually still up on our walls right now, these are the largest images we had in our lower lobby space. And it was a big deal for us to fill our walls with these images. You can't quite, do you remember the size of them? Because we can hardly tell with these photographs.
Yeah, I think there's 30 by 70.
Yeah, they were almost hard to see it.
Yeah.
And so it was quite the event to install these. And it was a special moment for us. And I remember on the day that they were installed, one of our A&W staff members walked up to them, and it's almost like a Rothko experience. It's almost immersive to stand right in front of it and engage with the whole wall. And she just cried, and she just looked at these images, and you can literally see the fingerprints and the toe prints. There's such detail to be inches away from these images, and she just wept, and it was an incredible moment to witness. And I completely recognize where that emotion is coming from. Can you tell us about who's in the photographs? And I can speak a little bit more about our partnership with Viva Brazil, but tell us about the model.
Well, it's an interesting story, because initially I was going to collaborate with the dancers for this, because the way I initially contemplated it, I was thinking that I was going to work with, with three people, possibly four, to sort of illustrate it. And for whatever reason, just logistics just didn't work. At some point, I thought it was all going to fall apart. And I reached out to my friend Jason, who I've known for a while as part of a men's group that we're part of. And he was just gung-ho, and it couldn't have been more perfect. Jason's not, he's not an actor. He's not a dancer. He's none of the things that I had anticipated I would need for this. But because that's what I had thought that I would need, someone who had really good control of their body and was very self-aware about their form. But what Jason brought to the project was a willingness to just go all out. And, what I just told them is that, all the pain that you've ever experienced for whatever reason, whatever your circumstances, I want you to use that as we did the series of images in black and white. And then the reverse, when we did the images in color, it's just like, I just want you to be in that moment where you feel completely loved, completely accepted, completely free. And that was it. And he just went full. He was 100%, 150%. And it was just a joy to watch him play and me trying to capture the moment that I had imagined in my mind's eye. I had never really worked in studio in this way. I had a friend, Everard Williams, who helped me with the lighting, with the technical side of you know, doing, in terms of making the photographs, which freed me completely to engage with Jason. And when he saw the images, he was just stunned because he had never seen himself in this particular way either. He'd never been photographed in this way. And so for all of us, it really was just an amazing experience. And when his family finally got a chance to see the photographs, they called me. They were in their car, and they were just laughing and just so joyful at having seen Jason, especially with those big prints up in that wall. And it was just so gratifying to see that I had created something that I was very proud of, but that it was something that that everyone who was involved with it felt like we had created something special.
It was certainly it was very special for us to support facilitating the creation of these. I mean, we hardly did anything. We just administrated or were administrators to it, but it was very special for us to support your vision. I've looked at a lot of your images, and again, I'm certainly not a photography expert, but I would say that a lot of what I've seen of your work appears to be candid. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about your relationship or the difference between something that one might call street photography as opposed to something more staged and a curated vision. Tell us more about that.
Well, you said earlier about my work that it's often about relationships. And I think that is something that I pursue, whether I'm doing this family project, which you showed earlier, which is me photographing young families doing their morning routines. I go to their homes for 3 hours soon after they wake up in the morning, and I just document their lives and during this particular, phase in their lives as parents and children. It sort of was inspired by the parent-child role reversal that's happening in my own house with us taking care of my mother-in-law. And but on the street, I'm also really interested in sort of the relationships and the way they are expressed in public. It's really interesting to see moments of relationships, reactions, public displays of affection in any myriad of ways, and seeing it on the stage of the street. Because I think that the street for me is a stage. And I love the challenge of being able to take all these sort of random elements that in the normal world have no relationship to each other and basically create a theatrical moment, on the street. Sometimes it includes people, sometimes it doesn't, but I'm always in the pursuit of capturing like a moment. And these are images that I've been doing of my mother-in-law, who's been staying with us for about a year now. She has early onset dementia. And after discovering she couldn't live with herself anymore, we brought her into our house. And as part of that journey, I wanted to start documenting her life with us, primarily for my wife and my sister-in-law, because it's a very difficult time because you're having to play the role of a caregiver, and also because of the medical issues, especially in relationship to memory, there's a sort of ongoing loss that's going on. And I wanted to document what was happening because I wanted them to be able to see when this was all over how much love and tenderness and care was being exhibited in the midst of a time where they're just focused on getting through day to day, in terms of taking care of her, going to work, paying bills. Taking care of an elderly parent is really demanding, and you can lose sight of the more intimate, special moments that happen. And I have just made it a point to photograph that, largely as a gift to my wife and my sister-in-law. And it's also given me a much greater appreciation for the role of parents and child, regardless of where on the timeline you are.
Wow. You said earlier that photography is your voice and your way of expressing yourself. I wonder what stories are important to you to tell now, or what stories do you foresee yourself having a a pulse to chase after moving forward. I mean, and that can be inspired by this very complicated moment we're in, or not. What's resonating for you?
My parents are from Dominican Republic, so I identify as Afro-Latino, and I really want to use my sort of going forward to sort of turn a lens onto those people, those communities, in a variety of different ways. I just feel like I've never really felt fully represented, especially in that way. Los Angeles, there are Afro-Latinos, not only from the Dominican Republic, but from different parts of the Caribbean and Central America. But it's not as concentrated as it is in New York or Miami. So it's always been, people have sort of just assumed that I'm African American, that I'm Black. And yes, I am Black, but there's also another part of me that was largely outside of my family. I didn't feel like part of a community, part of a group. And I think that's shared by a lot of others. And so I'd like to be able to, at some point when I have the freedom of interacting with people more freely, to do work that focuses on that particular aspect of the community, in terms of doing a series of portraits or doing documentary work. And also I have a project that involves multimedia with video and audio, in terms of being able to do a series of that. So I think that's at my heart what I think I'm going to be focusing on going forward, once we have the freedom to be able to interact safely with each other.
That's wonderful. I'm really familiar with the timeline and the process of putting on a play, and in many cases, in most cases, artists in theater have a relationship to that text and that story for months, a year. I mean, if you've been dreaming about a project, it might be multiple years. I wonder if you could tell me a little bit about some of the projects you've told us about. Are they projects that you sort of marinate with for a long period of time? Is it sort of a weekend photo shoot, or what is the timeline, or the length of relationship to the idea and to the actual technical process of producing it?
I just get the germ of the idea and I just start making photographs. For me, I can't think myself into something. I can think myself out of something. So I find that once I have the idea of something that I want to do, it's much easier for me to just start making the images and start figuring out as I go along. Both the Faithy project and the morning routine project with the families were just an idea, and I just started making photographs. And those are ongoing projects. So the Faithy project will probably be years. The family project will probably be more finite. I want to do probably around 12 families total. Do families, single parents, Asian, Latino, gay, lesbian, every variety of family I want to be able to photograph, just to sort of to explore all the different facets of what a family looks like, and to show how similar families are, especially during that crucial time between being a toddler to about 13 or 14 years old, before the kids lock themselves up in the room with their phones or their tablets, where there's a reliance on the parent to a degree that it gets easily lost in today's age. But there are other projects that I want to work on that are probably going to be like a day, right? Just because I want to be able to say that I finished something. It's probably like a writer who writes short stories along with a novel, just so you can feel like you've actually finished something. And for me, that's where I guess the street photography sometimes provides that, because I go out, I make the photographs, and I feel like I've accomplished something for that day. But I'm not one of those people who can sit down there and like make a plan. And like the 3/5 project, we had a very limited window by which to do it, and I was like, it was crazy, but it was so satisfying, to pull it off. Because at one point I thought it wasn't going to happen, but it was great, because just like everything else I've ever done in my life, it's like, okay, I could freak out right now, but let me just do the next indicated thing, which is like pick up the phone, reschedule, do whatever I needed to do, and just stay focused. And it came off beautifully.
Well, when you first presented your proposal or vision for what you wanted to pursue, I remember just being so blown away by it, and even more blown away when we saw the first of the 3 panels. It was so exciting to see realized. We have a question from our audience, and that is, it says, "I'm fascinated by your mixture of black and white and color photos. Why do you switch between the two, and how do you determine which photos to use, which style?"
Ooh, it's very subjective to the image. I shoot primarily in color. I shoot it digital, so every image comes out in color. But there's sometimes some images where, for example, I think that the gesture, if it incorporates people, sometimes the color can be a distraction, and it's not complementing everything else that I'm including in the image. And so I'll just strip it of the color and rely on it. And sometimes it's just about feel. I'll just take a look at the picture, feel like this image just needs to be black and white. The family series, I initially started in black and white, but I've not committed completely to do them in black and white. I may do them in color. The project is still early for me. I've only done like four families so far. So that may be subject to change, but for me, the family project was so much about the connection, the relationship, the love, that I felt that I wanted to strip away the color so that you focused more on the moments between the people more so than anything else.
I keep going back to the story, the relationships, the inner monologues of these characters, of these humans who are real people. And I don't think we have the photo I'm thinking of today, but there's one photo of I interpret it as a family. I assume of tourists. I assume walking in Los Angeles or a city, and it looks like their children are having a fine time, but the parents, I think especially the mom, is just so overwhelmed. And
yeah. That's the one. Yeah, I know which image you're talking about.
I adore that image. And there's another one of a young man at a cafe table, and a server looking over his shoulder, just giving him some sassy side eye. I just think you capture such vulnerable, even embarrassing, sometimes naughty, secretive moments. And especially for these street photographs, perhaps this is a silly question, and it's maybe so obvious to you, but how do you capture that in such a voyeuristic way, unlike, say, 3/5 Project, where you build a relationship with the model? How do you capture those moments when I assume folks have no idea you are capturing these embarrassing, vulnerable, magical glimpses?
Yeah, I hope it's never embarrassing.
Sure.
Because I don't, with my images, I want to lift people up. I don't want them to look at these pictures and feel like I was making fun of them or in any way. But I think part of the nature of shooting as long as I have on the street is that I kind of have developed a spidey sense in which I can see things sort of playing out. And just because I've seen it so many countless times, I can see a moment possibly about to present itself. Like there's an image that I took that's on my Instagram feed. So if people go to @Ibarionex, they'll have to scroll down a bit to find it. But I was at a corner and I was photographing people coming from the left and coming the right. And I was just at the corner where people would like intersect. And I just stood there just because I knew there would be an interaction. And then at some point, there was a black guy and a Latin guy that almost bumped into each other. And the black guy was mad dogging the Latin guy, right? And the Latin guy was like trying to avoid any eye contact because he was like, guys, like, he almost bumped into me. And it was just a couple of beats, right? It was just like maybe 2 or 3 seconds, and then they parted ways. And I got the shot where you have this moment of confrontation. And when I first stood at that corner, that wasn't happening yet. I just saw that all the visions were there for something to happen. And then I saw them coming, and I could see by the pace that they were both walking that they were going to encounter each other at some point. And so it's just a point of me just waiting to see what happened. And so much of what I see on the street is I'm seeing all these players, right? And I'm observing, and it's just like I just get a gut feeling, oh, there's something that could happen here. Or if a group of people are talking, 3 or 4 people are talking to each other, at some point they're going to react to each other. Someone's going to laugh, someone's going to reach over and touch someone, and those are the moments I'm waiting for it. And I'll just be there fiddling with my camera, and when the moment comes up, I'll just click, click, and usually they're so immersed in what they're doing, they don't even notice. And if they do, most people just don't care.
Mm-hmm. I was just thinking of that image of the 2 men at the corner. I'm glad you brought that up, and I'm sorry we don't have it for our audience, but it's a stunning moment of near collision, and it makes me wonder, what is your relationship as an artist to movement? You know,
it's amazing.
Yeah, because in theater, I mean, movement is a whole department, a whole professional on staff. Especially in the 3/5 project, there's the movement of the muscles and the black and white, and then the movement, the free movement of the red fabric. I'd love to know more about that.
Well, that's for me, it's just about gesture. Gesture can elevate practically any image, even if it doesn't have many of the other elements that usually make for a great photograph. Body language, the gesture of the hands, the slight tilt of a head, a stooped back, the way someone is scrambling to handle all these bags and a purse and a child in the crook of their arm. There's a dance that happens with people, and most people aren't observing it. I am. I'm constantly looking for that, because that for me is the performance. It's unconscious. They're not aware that they're doing it. They're not doing it purposely. But when within the context of the frame, it becomes a performance. And so what I have to do is I have to sort of anticipate the potential sort of explosion of that moment within the context of everything that's around it. Because I'm thinking about, okay, what's behind the subject? What's going to serve as the background? What's in the foreground? What's coming in from the left? What's coming into the right? Where's the light? Where's the shadow? Where's the color? So all of these things I'm having to quantify before the moment reveals itself. So, but I've gotten into the practice of doing it so much that usually I'll have processed all the secondary stuff ahead of time, so that all I have to do at that point is just focus on the moment. So I'll figure out what the stage is, and then when the person provides me the gesture, all I have to do is pay attention to that slight, that very slight change in body language that gives me everything. Because it can be a second. If I take it a second early, the image is shite. If I take it too late, it's shite. I have to get this sort of quintessential moment that I've anticipated, and most times I miss it, right? But when I do get it, it's incredibly satisfying.
Are there any moments you've missed that have haunted you or followed you?
Countless times. But I don't see those as failures, because for me, it's always practice, right? Because it's about, what's important to me is that I recognize the potential of the moment more so, right? Sometimes it's just that my reflexes are off, or my camera was off, or some stupid reason. But for me, if I recognized it, that for me is more important than whether or not I succeeded with making the photograph, because that's more important. My ability to be able to recognize, those visual gifts, because, if I'm going out there and I'm not in tune with that, if I'm not in that zone, it doesn't matter that I have the most expensive camera in the world. I won't be producing any sort of satisfying results. So the challenge for me every time I go out is, can I get myself into that place? Because my only goal anytime I go out and shoot on the street is I just got to come back with one picture. And that one picture has to be different than anything else I've ever produced. It doesn't necessarily have to be successful. It just has to demonstrate that I'm pushing myself, that I'm I'm not simply trying to reproduce the same picture that I've done before, but that somehow I can look at it and go, oh, there's something interesting I need to keep playing with. And then when I succeed in whatever that is, I move on to the next thing.
I so feel that you've succeeded with the 3/5 project. I think that and I think a lot of our many patrons who walk through that space were taken to that place with those images. And I feel like you capture magic. We're so lucky to have begun this partnership with you and to experience your art in our walls. So Ibarionex, thank you so much for being so generous with your voice, with your art, and with your time this evening. It's a real honor.
Oh, thank you, Jonathan. It's not the last time we have a chance to talk and collaborate.
That's true. Absolutely. So I want to invite all of our listeners to please find Ibarionex's work online. He's also the host of The Candid Frame. That's the Candid Frame podcast and website. And a huge shout out and thank you to our friends at Pasadena Photography Arts, specifically Bill Wishner, who connected Ibarionex with The Noise Within and was a great advocate for this project. And to all of you watching at home, we miss you terribly. We're so eager to be back in the theater with you. Thank you for sharing this virtual space with us, and we hope you're well, and we look forward to seeing you soon. Until next time, thank you.